Ever since early reports of the novel coronavirus were first being reported out of Wuhan, China, racism against Asian Americans has been steadily rising. Now that the coronavirus has become a global pandemic, many Asian Americans have found themselves in the unique predicament of not only having to worry about their health, but their safety also.
The country has seen a spike in anti-Asian hostility. And some of that is because of fears that people who look like they're Chinese um, are are at are to blame for the virus spreading around the world and specifically in the United States. And some of those hostilities have ranged from just small microaggressions to violent actions. I think people have been killed.
A new website called Stop AAPI Hate was launched to record some of these incidents. In its first month, the site received 1,497 reports. That's almost 375 incidents a week.
This uptick is very real. I mean, even in what's reported, let alone in incidents that are just not going to be reported, because there's a lot of times, these racist or sexist or, other kinds of incidents happen. And, if it's not totally violent, people aren't going to report it. What we know about is the tip of the iceberg.
And videos like these have been popping up all over the internet.
What? Are you from China? So we're Asian or we're Oriental.
If you're from China, I need to know.
Critics have said the president and his administration is in part to blame.
Why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all, no.
But to understand what's happening today, you have to look back at America's long and tangled history with racism against Asian Americans.
For centuries, white Americans in particular have long been suspicious of Asian folks and their bodies and how they might not be healthy and clean. There are examples like in 1900 or so in places like San Francisco and Honolulu, they literally had quarantines. And we see that in recent years with the Trump administration that and even before that, I think Americans are worried that, that China's taking away our jobs, right? That they are able to offer these cheaper goods, right? And those ideas go back to those older suspicions that Americans had of Chinese workers coming, accepting hard work for lower pay.
All these kind of negative stereotypes are the ones that are going to bubble to people's minds, and they're going to start acting on that.
Reading the news about these attacks has been overwhelming. The one that got me the most was the woman in Brooklyn who had acid thrown on her when she was putting her trash out. And so I think, will this be my family? Are they going to be in a headline someday?
It's safe to assume that the president and his rhetoric hasn't been helpful, but is the media a part of the problem too? Have headlines like these added fuel to the fire?
I haven't decided yet. I've been thinking about that a lot, especially as a journalist. I think that it's our industry's tendency to, we need to report on these things. But, there's conversations about, for example, how much free press Trump received leading up to the 2016 election. Can that translate also to then these stories about racism and calling things Chinese virus or Kung flu? The Kung flu thing really bothered me. So I'm always well, we need to know these things, but also how much of these stories are we going to put out there?
That's what makes him and him, I mean Donald Trump, in some ways politically, he's sort of brilliant, right? Because he understands how to work the news cycle, and and the cameras and the Twitter,
In early coronavirus coverage, a lot of publications use misleading imagery with their articles. Some have called this race baiting. For example, The first confirmed case of coronavirus in New York City was of a Manhattan woman who had traveled to Iran. But that didn't stop the New York Post from using this photo of an Asian man in Flushing, Queens. And it wasn't just the New York Post.
Having worked in these newsrooms, I understand sometimes you only have the photos and the footage that you have. And especially in the beginning, there was very limited footage or coverage of visual coverage of coronavirus. And so, you know, that's just all they had, and I get it. And I've been there when those decisions are made and you're in a pinch. That being said, I think we're at a point now where we have a wealth of representation at our fingertips that we can potentially steer away from those.
No, I mean, I don't understand if that was just people in a rush, people just didn't think it through. The lesson is that, you know, the images and the words we use have real life implications.
There's a lot of great things about America. But I tell you, you know, moments like this really test a society. I think the most important question any journalist can ask himself or herself right now is, you know, and this is true in any story, obviously, but I always like to think about what it's like if you were the subject.
You always need to take a step back and like think about those visual decisions that you're making. I think that newsrooms need to reflect the diversity that exists in America.